Hey, welcome to Thirsting for Truth with Marcus Guevara and Alicia Franco. Alicia, that's your cue.
Hey guys, how's it going? Hello from Texas. First I want to say before we get started, I'm in San Antonio, so we are dry here now. Just want to say to our friends in Houston and on the coast that we're thinking of you, praying for you, and we hope that you get dry soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I've really been thinking about that a lot. Being a native Texan myself, I feel for the people there, and I mean I know people in Houston, and so we have been praying and thinking a lot about those people, and yeah, just a sad situation. So, but you have a story, as I understand, that you wanted to jump right into. And unfortunately, in case anybody's wondering, we had promised our shows would start at 8 p.m. Eastern or 7 p.m. Central Time, and we just had some issues. I've had some internet issues. I had to change to a different computer and set everything up, so it kind of took us a little bit of time to get started.
But we're here now.
Started now. Yeah, and because of that, we're only going to go 30 minutes. So some people might actually be cheering about that. I don't know. It'll be a shorter show.
Okay, so
but anyway, so
the topic that we're going to talk about is an article that I kind of saw floating around on social media and other news venues, which was surprising to me. It's about an actress. Her name is Yvonne Orji. If you've never heard of her, Marcus and I were not too familiar with her, so we were talking about this before the show started. But she's a star on Insecure, which is, I believe, an HBO show. I personally have never seen it. I was reading up a little bit about it after reading about this actress, and Yvonne Orji is 33 years old, and she has been very public about waiting for marriage. She says, "I will remain a virgin until marriage because of my Christianity." And it kind of blew up. People had a strong reaction to it, and I think part of that has to do with the fact that she's 33 years old, and I was kind of surprised by this.
What were the reactions? I haven't seen anything on it. So what were the reactions?
Negative. They said, she's crazy. Why would she do something like that? It's a stupid decision. And she starts to fire back to these people attacking her on whether it be Facebook, Twitter, whatever. She kind of reposts the haters and says, what happened to people doing what they want with their body? You're using your opinions in the opposite light, saying, I should be able to do whatever I want. And here I am doing something in what I believe is a positive decision for myself and for those that I come in contact with, and people are attacking me for it. And I agree with her. I don't think that people should be attacking her for a decision that is a decision of love, honestly.
Well, I mean, I get it. Like, I know that, that I would expect that reaction, mostly in my opinion, because anytime that somebody challenges, like, I'm trying to rephrase this properly because I'm not trying to say challenges evil, even though that is in a certain sense. I think what happens in any case that, evil, and I mean specific, like the devil is challenged, he, begins attacking, right? Like, but in regards to the people, not necessarily evil people, but when people are doing something that they shouldn't be doing, when they're challenged by seeing somebody else who's trying to do the right thing, it makes them very uncomfortable. If you're at work, right, and you've been goofing off all day and messing around and you're not getting your stuff done, and then here comes the star worker, who's got everything done, and they're like, hey, great job, like, man, that's awesome. They can't believe you get all that done. It makes you really frustrated and mad that they made you, I mean, in your mind, they're making you look bad, right? They're your contrast.
Yeah, and those tend to be the guys that are being teased, but really you can tell that's definitely a source of insecurity. It's, oh, you're showing off, or teacher's pet, blah, 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 stuff like that. It's kind of the same thing. But something that also struck me was I could relate to her. I haven't necessarily been attacked on social media platforms or all that publicly. But for those who haven't heard my story before, haven't heard Marcus's story before, this was something that not even necessarily publicly, just something that I have lived. I want to wait until I get married, and I've definitely been chastised for that. I've actually literally had someone tell me, "You are stupid. You don't know what you're missing out on." And I remember just thinking, how am I supposed to respond to that? It's happened sadly enough now that I've developed a better reaction to it, which is one of teaching. But Marcus, have you ever had somebody react so strongly to saying something like that?
Well, I mean, I guess in my case, when I turned a new leaf and was trying to do things differently and be a better person, I did, I'm sure. But what's really funny is that not necessarily. And I guess maybe it was because of the way that I presented it. Like I was a person who came from making mistakes and really doing things the wrong way. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. And then I wanted to be better, and I just voiced it that way, right? Like I don't know. Like I think that sometimes Christians also kind of do it a disservice, right? Like we become too married to these like terms where that I don't know, they're just like kind of they're more of like being part of this like cutesy gang than I think that to the outside world, people just don't understand it, right? Mm-hmm. When you say like, well, I'm just trying to wait until marriage. Well, like that's such a weird thing for somebody who's never been within like a Christian circle, because it's like, well, what are you waiting for? You're just waiting because you think that's what God wants you to do or whatever. And I think again, if you come from the perspective of when you're saying like, I'm trying to make myself better, I'm trying to stop screwing up because I don't like the way my life is, it's hard for people to argue with that, right? It's easier for somebody, like if somebody says like oh, McDonald's is the worst, I'll never eat McDonald's, you shouldn't eat McDonald's, then it pisses people off, because then they're like, well, what the freak, I like McDonald's, right? So why are you attacking McDonald's? Mm-hmm. I eat McDonald's all the time. I give my kids McDonald's. Something that
I also relate to is, I mean, I like what you said, where if people say, "Oh, I'm doing this, because I'm a Christian." I think also something that gets overlooked is the fact that, how do I put this? So when you're younger,
put it good.
When you're younger, and I remember saying this to my friends when I was like 10. I would have friends ask me, this did happen. They would say, well, you're grounded. You can't do this tonight. And I said, yeah, I'm grounded. I can't go out. Well, why? And sometimes honestly, I would forget what I did. And I would say, well, I'm grounded because my parents told me that I was grounded, which is, I mean, in retrospect, it's good to be obedient to your parents. I mean, good job, 10-year-old Alicia. However, that's not going to make sense to your friends. So if somebody has no experience with Christianity whatsoever, if your reason for waiting is only because of Christianity, that is so foreign to them that they are not going to grasp it. So I think that it's important and I believe that Yvonne has done a good job doing this. She has not been quiet about saving herself. She really does like to talk about it. She's done some TED Talks on the topic, and really inspires people in a very positive way. It's very inspiring to listen to her. And so she does give the reasons to why she wants to wait. So I encourage you guys to look her up and listen to those. But I think that just saying that I'm a Christian doesn't fully explain the concept.
Yeah, and I haven't heard her, so I'll have to look her up and hear more of what she has to say. And I think in general, it's just we have to get better at this. We have to get better at how we communicate it. Because again, like if you just tell people, I hate McDonald's, or and especially if they're like, well, have you ever tried McDonald's? And you're just like, no, McDonald's is bad for you. And they're like, okay, but do you know how freaking good it is? Because those fries are good. and I get that, right? Like I can understand where people are coming from in that perspective. But if you phrase it in a way, there's like really two ways to, I think, approach this, you know. And again, keeping the McDonald's analogy, because everybody loves to hate on McDonald's, so it's a good example. But if you come from the perspective you're like overweight, you know, way out of shape, or you're like really sick or something because of eating a lot of McDonald's all the time, and you're like, you know, I've been eating McDonald's for a long time, and I'm tired of how it makes me feel. I'm tired of gaining weight. I'm tired of not being able to exercise and get into shape. And when I get out on the basketball court and, you know, I'm ready to throw up after 60 seconds of exercise, I'm embarrassed, and I'm just tired of that. And I want better for myself, you know? So I'm giving up McDonald's because I need to get back into shape, and I want to do better, and that's going to prevent me from getting there. Again, that's hard for people to argue with, right? I mean, because everybody wants to feel good and be healthy, and everybody wants to, you know, be good at their sport or whatever. So it's hard for people to argue with that. For one thing, I mean, I think they'll respect it, actually, because then you're going to echo something that's a truth in their heart, which is, oh yeah, well, I've been wanting to work out and get better at, you know, my sport too, or whatever, right? Like feel better and look better, and so that's one way to approach it. The other way to approach it is, you don't have to be overweight and feel horrible to make that decision to be better, right? Like Kobe Bryant and like Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and some of these like really great NBA players, they were never horrible, you know, like the worst of the worst NBA basketball players. They were just guys who, from a very young age, were committed to their craft and decided that they were going to put in the work to do that. And in order to do that, to become as good as they became in their in basketball, and to be as good as they were as athletes, they had to also give up things. They had to, you know, be able to say, yeah, I can't go to the party tonight because I need to get my rest for the big game tomorrow. They had to be able to say, yeah, no thanks, and I can't drink alcohol right now. I'm in an intense training program. I just, you know why? Because I want to be a champion. That's what's on my heart and on my mind. And I don't care what you guys say. When you guys see me, you know, holding up the trophy, you're gonna be jealous, right? Because that's my mission. My goal is to be a champion, and anything that's gonna hold me back from doing that, I don't care. I want it out of my way, because it's just in my way from what I truly want, which is to be a champion. So again, nobody's gonna want to argue with that, right? I mean, they might say like, oh man, but they're gonna really respect that at the same time. And if we're not really for one thing, if that's not how you're approaching it, then I think you already have an issue, right? If you're just simply waiting for marriage, it's just not fruitful. Like, you have to have a goal. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not just not drinking alcohol because I don't want alcohol to screw up something for me that I don't even know that I want to do. I have to have a specific goal that it's going to prevent me from, so that you see what I'm saying? Like, what is your thoughts on that?
I like what you said about somebody going back to the NBA players like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, all those guys. The key concept underneath it all is sacrifice. It takes many sacrifices to be a Christian, and you don't even necessarily have to be a Christian to make this decision. Yvonne Orji we are, and nobody really says, hey, you're going to have to face all this criticism based on the decision that you make. And it's just something that we have to kind of evolve to be ready for as challenges come across.
Yep, absolutely. And so, again, like putting this in terms of faith, you know, we talk a lot on this show about love, sex, marriage, and kind of how this stuff is so important to our faith lives. And I mean, it's important to really everybody's life. I think it's part of like the core of humanity, which is why if somebody's, I mean, it's such a weird thing, right? It's such a weird phenomenon that somebody reveals something personal, like, oh, I'm waiting to have sex for marriage, and like the whole world, whoever is, you know, like sees the news or whatever, has something to say about it. Like, they just can't help themselves. I mean, I have to like speak my mind on this. Like, why? It has nothing to do with you, really. But it does, I think, actually. So it really does have something to do with everybody, because it really gets to the core of who we are. And you standing up and witnessing that really challenges everybody. And I think, it slices right through your heart, because you're sort of faced with that question that I think a lot of people have very frequently and are always searching for answers to, which is, what is sex for? Like, what is the purpose here? And why is it so powerful? Why do I have these powerful, powerful desires? But as a Christian, again, I think you also need to make sure that you know the answer to that question, and you're constantly seeking it, because if you're not, then, really you're going nowhere. And I see, there's lots of people who are Christians and who are waiting for marriage. And I put that, in quotes, not because they're not actually having sex, but because, they're waiting for marriage like they would wait for a comet, to hit the earth and end the world. And it's like, that's, you don't just wait for something, to either happen or, hopefully not happen. You got to, when we talk about waiting for marriage, this is like an active waiting, right? Like, that would be like me, I would think, saying, I'm waiting for the championship game. You know what I mean? Like, I'm anxiously waiting for that moment
But are you
to
practicing
shine.
now?
Exactly, right. Like, you don't just wait for the day to show up. You actually have to prepare yourself so that when the day comes, you have the opportunity to take hold of it and do something great with it, right?
Right. So on kind of piggybacking off of that, I would say that something that we often forget, as not only as Christians but as Catholics, is that part of that interior battle that we face as human beings, the struggle with waiting for marriage. We all have desires. It's not just waiting until marriage. Just because you get married doesn't mean. And here's a good chance for our single versus married dynamic to come into play. But you're not just waiting for marriage. It's fully understanding what role our sexuality plays in our lives. When you get married, you don't necessarily just turn a switch from off to on. It's it has to do, again, with the theology of the body. So, Marcus, I'll let you comment on that.
Turning the switch from off to on? Is that what you're saying?
Well, what do you think, not just as Christians, but specifically as Catholics, we have to, I guess the word would be evangelize, that we have to explain that our non-Catholic brothers and sisters may not understand about the role that sex plays within marriage, and that it's not just fair game all the time. And I'm, of course, touching on topics like contraception.
Oh, I see. Okay, so, right. I guess then what we're really talking about here is, what is the virtue of chastity, as opposed to just the,
Yeah. So what role does chastity play within marriage? Does chastity end when you get married? Yes or no? And if no, why not?
Well, it's funny. It almost sounds like you're setting up like a sort of elementary question, does 1 + 1 = 2? But I get it. I mean, because this is a legitimate question a lot of people have, because they don't really know what it means, what chastity means, and again, that's another one that's kind of got a bad rap. The word chastity, because it makes it sound like it's this, kind of fairy tale-ish thing. Like, nobody really does that anymore. It's not like it's sort of it's a very dumb, old, archaic practice where girls used to wear these little chastity belts. They had a lock and key on them, and it's you had to get it from the dad or whatever, get the key to. But anyway, so chastity is a virtue like honesty, right? And so chastity is a thing that enables you. It's a virtue that enables you to know the right thing to do in a situation, and then to be able to have the will to choose that right thing, even if it means suffering and sacrifice. That's probably the easiest way to define it, you know. So if you like, I have kids, right? And this happened last night. You know, actually, our 1-year-old was crying, and like at 3:30 in the morning, he was crying, and I was exhausted. But you know, I got up, and of course, you know, your first like the sort of inclination is like, oh God, I hope he stops crying, and just goes back to sleep. And you know, but obviously 5 seconds later, he's still crying, and you know, something like I guess, you know, when after they start sleeping through the night, they're not just waking up and crying for no reason. Something's got to be going on. You know, he has a diaper that's huge, full of pee, and it's like he's all wet or something, or his leg is stuck in the crib. There has to be a reason, right? So I got to think to myself again, like, you know, the selfish part of me wants to stay in bed, and I'm just like, you know, if I just stay here for a couple more minutes, maybe he'll just stop crying on his own. But the dad in me is like, well, this is my job. This is what I'm called to do, right? Like, if I got to get up and I got to, you know, go and change his diaper, and then, you know, and I can wait, like, in bed, like, pretending like I don't hear, and maybe my wife will get up and take care of him. But again, like, I'm like, but that's my job is, you know, as the father of this family, to get up and to sacrifice for my child and for my wife. And so I have to kind of motivate myself to say, like, I know that that's the right thing to do, you know, and yes, it's a little bit of sacrifice, and that's not a whole lot right there, right? I mean, still, getting up and doing that is part of my sacrifice. As a woman, you know, when you're open to life and you get pregnant, you know before you get pregnant that labor is going to be difficult and painful. But you're open to it. You choose to do it because you know that, you know, to have a child and to give life to a human being demands sacrifice and pain and suffering. And you do it, you make the choice to do it despite the suffering, or actually with accepting and embracing the suffering that you're going to take on. And that's really what chastity is. That's when we talk about waiting, we're talking about doing what's best for the other person. And what's best for the other person is to never make commitments that they cannot hold up to, right? So think about it this way. If, you know, somebody got a job at a movie theater, you know, making $7 an hour, some, you know, 18-year-old kid, and somebody comes up and offers to sell them a house for $300,000 or $400,000, and says, hey, all you got to do is sign on the line right here. You know, knowing full well that they don't have the ability to make those payments, they're going to end up going into, you know, foreclosure very soon. They're going to waste all their money on that, and they're going to end up finding themselves, you know, in a very, very bad financial position. So if somebody gets them to sign on the dotted line, knowing that they cannot hold to that commitment, that's dishonest. That's terrible, right? Like, you know you're putting somebody in a very, very bad spot there. And that's exactly how I would say, you know, when we talk about waiting, that's the kind of same waiting, right? Like, everybody wants a beautiful house. Everybody wants a mansion, and, you know, everybody wants a house with 3 or 4 or 5 bedrooms and a big backyard or whatever. We all want that, but we're not always in a position where we can afford that, right? And so it's not a good thing to go and get ourselves into a commitment that we cannot uphold, because the consequences are very grave. That can affect you for a very, very long time. It's the same thing with a relationship where you're giving your body to somebody else. You could potentially become pregnant. You know, there's you know, STDs and all that stuff. Yeah, that's part of the mix, and I'm not, you know, saying that to scare people, but those are part of the consequences of being sexually active with multiple people. And so what I'm saying is that, like, these are not light things. And so this is way more. Getting pregnant and having a baby is far more a commitment than buying a house. You could sell a house in a couple of years, or you could foreclose on a house, and yeah, you're in a bad spot, but you cannot, like, you know, renege on the commitment of a baby, of a person who's going to rely on you for, you know, the rest of their life, or till they're 18, or, you know, kick them out of the house to go to college or whatever. But does that make sense? I mean, what chastity means to me, at least, and that's why it never ends when you get married, because I still have those commitments that I signed up for a long time ago that I'm still working hard to maintain.
Yeah, so I think that goes back to what we were talking about in our last podcast. So if you guys haven't listened to that one, go listen to it. And basically, what I
Yep.
think Marcus is touching on is, did you want to tell them where they could find it? Do they know?
Well, the easiest way is just go to thirstingfortruth.com. They're all posted right now on the front page. And so we'll do that after each show.
Thirstingfortruth.com, guys. Anyway, if you are sexually active, what you have to understand is that procreation and what is the word, babies and bonding. So
Yeah.
you can't accept the bonding part of the act without accepting the babies part of the act. It was what sex was created for, and I like what you said too about again. I started off this whole discussion with explaining that one of the reasons that Yvonne's testimony was so shocking was she's 33 years old. And I think it's more common to us to hear people saying that, and then unfortunately they seem to give up sometimes. When we're younger, I saw a lot more of my peers saying, "Yeah, I want to wait until marriage," and that's just not a common thing anymore. It's especially unusual at 33. So the shock of it was, how did she do that, and why is she doing that? It's and the discussion among women a lot is back to the babies topic. Well, you're only going to be able to have babies for so long, and they're thinking, oh, you're 33 years old, you're missing out, you're wasting time. But at the same time, we live in a contraceptive culture where you should have children wherever you want. So it's very oddly negatively secular. She's making a decision that's positive for her, and people are reacting strangely negatively to it. So if you're in the boat with us and you're waiting until you get married, then hey, if you guys have never met me before, I'm 26 years old, so I totally understand that. Yeah, it can seem like a hard wait sometimes because when we're younger, it seems a little more prevalent, but it's gotten more and more unusual. So hang in there.
Gotcha. So we have just about a minute left. So some closing comments from me. I guess again, like coming from like a guy's perspective, the way I see it is, when you know what you want for your life, and you might come from a similar sort of scenario where you've had this in your family, just through generations, where people get pregnant out of wedlock or very early, or people get divorced, and you have just issues like that. At some point, somebody's got to break the chain. Somebody has to break the cycle, break out of it, and do something different, right? For the sake of your children. Do something better for the legacy that you're going to leave behind for your family. And so to me, I look at that, and again, like I see, like, where do I want to be? What do I want to do? And how am I going to get there? But also, what's going to hold me back? And I look at it like, there's so much on the line there. Your future relationship, your future marriage, your future children, all of that stuff is going to be based on the kind of sacrifices that you're willing to make. Anybody who knows that they want to do something great in sports, if you one day want to get into the NBA or the NFL, or if you want to be a PhD or something like that, you have to know that's going to demand great sacrifice. And at some point, you need to accept it, and you just need to know that you're going to have to work. But if you're not willing to do that for your marriage or for your children, then just, again, like, it's illogical. Then you know that you're not going to be a champion husband or wife. You're not going to be a champion father. And you're not going to have a life that's worth living. It's just a natural consequence. And so from the guy's perspective, you need to decide what you want, and then you need to realize that that's going to take some sacrifice, and then you need to embrace that sacrifice.
Yeah, if you want to make it to the championship game, you got to practice every single day.
Absolutely. And you got to practice being a good person. It doesn't just come accidentally, right? So,
yeah.
Alicia, thanks so much for joining me again. I always enjoy our conversations. So for everyone who's interested, again, this will occur every Monday at 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And thirstingfortruth.com will have the historical podcast. We'll post this one right after it's finished. But otherwise, Alicia, again, thank you so much for your time, and we will hang out next week, I guess. Right?
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Labor Day. We'll have to think about it. But anyway, all right. I'll talk to you later, Alicia.
Bye, guys. Bye, Marcus.